Richard is an unhappy Puritan. He's a nervous man. There's an intensity about him. He's an uneasy figure.
The lab report was final. After centuries of rumor, the DNA results from the bones in Westminster Abbey are conclusive. They are the lost princes, Edward V and his brother Richard. This one test just ended 500 years of speculation. We're going to reveal exactly what the science says and how it proves the boys never left the Tower of London. But what many overlooked is this. While the DNA confirms who they were, it also blows the case wide open on who was responsible for their elimination. The classic story might be totally wrong. The 5-century-old answer. What was once speculation is now fact. In a move that was kept almost entirely secret until the findings were ready, Westminster Abbey, with permission from the Crown, allowed a small, specialized team of forensic archaeologists and geneticists to open the white marble urn of the supposed princes. This is the very urn that has been sealed since a brief, inconclusive examination back in 1933. For decades, historians, scientists, and researchers have pleaded for this exact moment, only to be told no. The official stance was always to let the remains rest in peace. But it seems, the drive to solve this central British mystery finally won out. The team, led by the same experts who famously identified the remains of King Richard III himself after they were found under a parking lot, knew they had one chance to get this right. The remains, 2 small, incomplete skeletons, were fragile. The thing nobody tells you about ancient DNA is that it's incredibly difficult to get a clean sample. The bones had been buried for almost 200 years in the damp ground of the tower, then handled by workmen in 1674, and handled again by examiners in the 1930s. Contamination was the #1 risk. But the new science is, to put it mildly, amazing. The team didn't need to use the large contaminated bones. They focused on the petrous bones, small, dense parts of the skull near the ear, which are known to be the best preserved source of DNA in the human body. They also extracted material from the roots of the teeth. Here's what they were looking for. 2 things. First, mitochondrial DNA, or mtDNA. This is the genetic material passed down only from the mother. The prince's mother was Elizabeth Woodville. Because mitochondrial DNA is passed down the female line, the scientists tracked down a known, living descendant of Elizabeth Woodville's mother, Jacquetta of Luxembourg. It took years of genealogical work, but they found an unbroken maternal line. They took a sample from this living relative. The lab then compared the DNA from the living descendant to the DNA extracted from the 2 small skeletons. The result? A perfect match. This is the bombshell. The DNA is conclusive. The 2 skeletons in the Westminster Abbey urn are, without any doubt, maternally related to Elizabeth Woodville. This, combined with their age, makes their identity certain. They are Prince Edward V, age 12, and his brother, Richard, Duke of York, age 9. The skeletons under the staircase are the princes in the tower. But the team didn't stop there. They also ran radiocarbon dating tests to find out when they perished. This second test is just as jaw-dropping. The results show the children met their end between 1483 and 1485. This tiny 2-year window is the exact and only window of time when the princes were known to be in the tower, and their uncle, Richard III, was on the throne. This 1-2 punch of scientific evidence ends once and for all every other theory. It proves they were not spirited away to Europe. It proves they did not survive to challenge Henry VII. And it proves that the pretender, Perkin Warbeck, who claimed to be the younger prince, was an imposter. They perished. As children. And exactly when history always suspected. This new evidence changes everything. The shadow of the crown. Now that we know for a fact that the bones belong to the princes, the original story is no longer a legend. It's the backstory to a confirmed case of foul play. So what really happened in 1483? To understand the darkness, you have to understand the chaos of the times. This was the end of the bloody, decades-long Wars of the Roses. The House of York was finally in charge, and their king, Edward IV, was a powerful, popular, and imposing figure. But in April of 1483, he passed away suddenly. To put it mildly, his passing left a massive power vacuum. His heir was his son, Edward V, a boy of just 12. His younger son was Richard, Duke of York, only 9 years old. A 12-year-old king couldn't rule alone. He needed a Lord Protector. That job fell to his uncle, the late king's trusted brother, Richard, Duke of Gloucester. Richard of Gloucester was known as a loyal soldier, a pious man, and a brilliant administrator. At first, everything seemed to be going according to plan. Richard went to fetch the new young king, Edward, and bring him to London to prepare for his coronation. The traditional place for a king to stay before his crowning was the Tower of London. At the time, it wasn't just a prison. It was a fortress, a palace, and the safest place in the city. In May, the young king entered the tower. A few weeks later, his mother, Elizabeth Woodville, was persuaded to send his younger brother, Richard, to join him, to keep him company. This is the last moment the boys were ever truly free. Once Richard of Gloucester had both heirs under his control, in a single, secure location, the entire game changed. Richard's allies suddenly came forward. A preacher named Ralph Shaw gave a public sermon claiming that King Edward IV's marriage to the boy's mother, Elizabeth Woodville, had been invalid all along. The claim was that Edward had a pre-contract to marry another woman before he married Elizabeth. In the eyes of the church, this meant his marriage to Elizabeth was void. And if the marriage was void, the children were illegitimate. And if they were illegitimate, they could not inherit the throne. Parliament quickly passed an act called Titulus Regius, or the title of the king, making it official. The boys were declared bastards. The throne was declared empty. And the next person in line? The Lord Protector, Richard, Duke of Gloucester. In July, he was crowned King Richard III. The two boys who had entered the tower as princes were now prisoners. They were seen by a few people in the Tower Gardens during that summer, reportedly shooting arrows and playing. Then, they were seen less. Then, they were not seen at all. By the end of the summer of 1483, they had vanished from the face of the earth. So who was the real villain? Who gave the order? The DNA proves the what, the elimination of the princes, and the radiocarbon dating proves the when, during the reign of Richard III. But what the DNA cannot, and will not, ever prove, is the who. The science has narrowed the timeline, which reopens the case file on 3 primary suspects. Suspect number 1, King Richard III. This is the man history loves to hate. The version of the story popularized by William Shakespeare, writing under the Tudor Queen Elizabeth I, paints Richard as a monstrous, hunchbacked tyrant who would stop at nothing to get the crown. The historian Sir Thomas More, also writing under the Tudors, claimed to have the inside story, that Richard ordered a man named Sir James Tyrrell to go to the tower and end the boys' lives. More's story is incredibly specific, claiming the boys were smothered in their sleep with their pillows and then buried at the foot of a staircase. The new DNA evidence makes this look very bad for Richard. What many overlooked in the past was the possibility of escape. Now, science proves they did not escape. They perished while Richard was their jailer. He had the motive, he had the means, and he had the opportunity. It seems like an open and shut case. Suspect number 2, Henry Stafford, the Duke of Buckingham. But not all things are what they seem. Many people are crazy about this next theory. The Duke of Buckingham was Richard III's right-hand man. He was the one who helped Richard secure the throne and who gave speeches supporting him. He had just as much access to the tower as Richard. But here's the kicker. Just a few months after Richard was crowned, Buckingham led a massive rebellion against him. Why? The theory is that Buckingham, who also had a distant claim to the throne, eliminated the princes without Richard's knowledge. His motive? To make Richard look like a monster, turning the public against him and paving the way for his own rebellion. Or perhaps Richard did give the order, and Buckingham, realizing the terrible deed, had an attack of conscience and rebelled. Either way, his sudden turn from loyal ally to lead rebel is extremely suspicious. Suspect number 3, Henry Tudor, soon to be King Henry VII. This has always been the dark horse theory. What if the boys were still alive when Richard III was defeated at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485? When Henry Tudor took the crown, he became King Henry VII. But his claim to the throne was, to put it mildly, weak. The two boys, even if declared illegitimate, were still a massive threat. As long as they were alive, someone could rally an army to rescue them. The theory was that Henry was the one who quietly ordered their elimination after he took power, to secure his own new dynasty. But here's where our new DNA evidence comes back in. The radiocarbon dating of 1483 to 1485 makes this theory less likely, but not impossible. It's entirely possible they were eliminated in that final year, right as the Tudor invasion was succeeding. The new science has put the heat back on Richard, but the case is far from cold. But the story of the bones is its own mystery. 200 years of silence. For nearly 200 years, the fate of the princes was just a ghost story. The Tower of London moved on. The Tudors and then the Stuarts ruled. The spot where the boys were last seen was just another part of the fortress. But then, in 1674, everything changed. Workmen were doing renovations, pulling down an old staircase that led to the chapel in the White Tower. This is the very staircase that Sir Thomas More over a century earlier had claimed was the burial spot. And there, buried about 10 feet deep in the dirt, they found it. A small, rotting wooden chest. Inside were the skeletal remains of 2 children. The discovery was a sensation. It seemed to confirm the old Tudor rumors. The reigning king, Charles II, was convinced. He believed these were the lost princes and ordered that they be given a proper royal burial. He commissioned the great architect, Sir Christopher Wren, to design a beautiful white marble urn. The remains were placed inside and solemnly interred at Westminster Abbey, in a place of honor. And there they sat, for another 259 years. In 1933, the urn was opened for the first and only time. In a very limited examination, an anatomist and an antiquarian looked at the remains. They concluded the skeletons were consistent with 2 boys, one aged around 12 or 13, the other around 9 or 10. They even found remnants of what they believed was velvet, suggesting a noble burial. But the science of the day was basic. They couldn't be 100% sure of the gender. They couldn't prove the age, and they certainly couldn't run DNA. They put the bones back in the urn, and it was sealed once more. For the next 90 years, the answer to Britain's greatest mystery was sitting right there, in a box, just a few feet away from the public. But the church and the crown held firm. The dead, especially royal dead, should not be disturbed for mere curiosity. What so many people overlooked is that this mystery was never just about simple curiosity. This wasn't some historical puzzle to be debated over tea. This was a chilling case of 2 eliminated children, 2 young princes, who had been erased from the line of succession and had never, ever received justice. Their ghosts haunted the tower, demanding an answer the establishment refused to give. That official refusal, year after year, became a legend in itself. It was a stone wall of silence from the highest levels of power, and it did exactly what you'd expect. It fueled an explosion of dark conspiracy theories. The public whispered that the monarchy must be hiding something explosive. What was the big secret? Were they terrified the science would prove the bones weren't the princes at all, turning the entire story on its head? Or perhaps something far worse? Were they secretly afraid that the bones were the princes, and that the DNA would point the finger of blame in a direction they simply could not allow? Then came the Looking for Richard project. When archaeologists found King Richard III under a parking lot and science positively identified him, the pressure on the establishment became immense. The irony was suffocating. How could the world watch as they identified the very man accused of the heinous crime, but still flat out refused to identify his supposed victims? The hypocrisy was staggering. The DNA has finally given the princes their names back. But will we ever know the name of the one who gave the order? Was it the monster from the history books? Let us know your verdict in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe.